Story 1. The security feed always froze at 4:17, but only in one room. This happened to me in 2019. I was working night shifts as a systems technician at a mid-sized psychiatric hospital in the suburbs of Colorado Springs. The hospital had 3 floors, one of which was a recently decommissioned wing that had supposedly been converted into storage. My job was pretty straightforward. Monitor the facility's internal networks, maintain the servers, and keep the camera feeds running cleanly overnight. It was quiet work. That's what I liked about it. There was a tech room on the lower level, small, windowless, lit by the cold blue wash of monitors. That's where I spent most of my shift, between checking diagnostics and reviewing footage. The building was old, but the system had been upgraded not long before I started. We had high-res, low-light cameras covering almost every hall, stairwell, and patient wing. I'd been doing the job for 6 months before I noticed anything strange. It started with a minor glitch. One of the feeds from the 3rd floor would occasionally freeze, just for a second or two, always around the same time. At first, I chalked it up to a cabling issue or interference, but after the 3rd time it happened, I started logging it. Same camera, same room. Room 302, every time, 4:17 a.m. On the dot, the image would stop, not go black, just pause. But when I reviewed the footage frame by frame, I realized something more unsettling. The feed didn't freeze, it looped. Exactly 3 seconds of footage repeated itself. Same timestamp, same pixel shifts, same tiny flicker of light bouncing off a corner of the IV rack in the exact same way. At first, I thought I was imagining it. So I captured both sequences side by side, down to the millisecond. They were identical. Even more disturbing, in the corner of the frame, on the far wall, there was a shadow. One that didn't match anything in the room. It was tall and narrow, not like a person standing, more like someone leaning or watching from a position that didn't exist in any recorded layout. No source, no object casting it, it just moved slightly, the same way, every time. I ran diagnostics on the feed, I replaced the encoder, I checked the server logs. The footage always rendered fine. The rest of the night was normal. Only those exact 3 seconds would duplicate, overlay, and snap back in at 4:17 a.m. When I brought it up in the shift notes, the supervisor brushed it off. Might be memory buffering, legacy data leak or something. But I couldn't stop thinking about that shadow. One night, out of sheer frustration, I walked up to room 302 myself. It was about an hour before the glitch time. The hallway was quiet, dimly lit. Room 302 was locked, but I had access. When I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was the smell, like disinfectant that had soaked too long. The room was completely empty, bare floor, stripped bed frame, unplugged monitor. It didn't look used. It wasn't scheduled for any patient. I stood there trying to map the exact angle the camera would have. I turned slowly, aligning myself where the shadow had been in the feed. Nothing, just a blank stretch of wall. But as I stood there, something strange happened. The lights in the hallway flickered, just once, like a pulse. I didn't think much of it at the time. I locked the door and went back down. That night I watched the glitch happen again. At 4:17 a.m., same loop, same 3 seconds. But this time, the shadow didn't move. It was still, as if it had noticed I'd been there. Room 302 was supposed to be out of use. It had been fully renovated just last year. New flooring, new fixtures, even new door hardware. I'd seen the invoices. The wing had been cleared temporarily, while contractors gutted and rebuilt the space. But 3 weeks after the glitch first started, patients started being reassigned there again. No formal announcement, no official reason. At first, it was just one, then another. The thing that stood out to me, every one of them had a similar line in their file. Reports difficulty sleeping, requests additional observation. The weird part, every single reassignment happened during my shift. I'd be sitting there watching the feed when a nurse or orderly would escort a patient into 302. Usually around 1 or 2 a.m., I started recognizing patterns. None of these patients had previously been in isolation rooms. None had histories of violence. But once they were moved to 302, things would change. Their vitals would spike, they'd stop speaking. And more than once, I saw them standing in the same spot in the room, facing the same wall, the one where the shadow always appeared. I checked their charts. Nights after being moved to 302, they all reported the same thing. "I'm not alone in there." Sometimes it was phrased differently. "There's something in the corner. I feel watched. There's someone standing where the mirror used to be." Except there had never been a mirror in that room. I flagged it in the system, reached out to internal maintenance, asked them to check the electrical in 302. They did. Report came back clean, but the reassignments kept happening. One night I tried to pull up the live feed early, around 3:45. There was no loop yet. Everything looked static. Then at 4:17, just like always, the 3 seconds froze. And this time, there was someone in the room. Not a patient, not any nurse I recognized. They were just standing in the same corner, barefoot, wearing scrubs that didn't match any current hospital set. I looked through the admissions logs. No one had entered the floor for the past hour, no badged entries. No camera activity on the stairwells. The figure didn't appear again, just during the loop. I checked the footage from the hallway camera outside 302. At 4:17, the hallway lights dimmed for a fraction of a second, then returned. No one entered, no one left. I stopped reporting the anomalies after that. There wasn't anyone else paying attention. It was a Wednesday when I remembered the old tape backups. Before the hospital upgraded to digital, all feeds were dumped into VHS, a legacy system the IT staff never fully decommissioned. Some old techs said the analog feed sometimes caught things the digital systems filtered out. Compression errors, noise cleanup, whatever. I'd never bothered with it. Until that night. I dug through the storage room under the main stairwell. Behind a locked panel most of the staff had forgotten about. The backups were dusty, unlabeled. But I found the stack marked 302 maintenance test logs. I loaded one into the old player, patched it to a monitor and waited. Nothing for the first hour, just a dark, empty room. Then, at exactly 4:17 a.m., the tape popped and hissed. The video cut out. Audio kicked in, just static at first. Then a faint clicking, like someone tapping metal. Then, a voice. I don't know how else to describe it. It wasn't loud, barely above a whisper, but it said something I'll never forget. "I only exist when you forget me." I rewound it, played it again, same thing. The video never returned. The feed just stayed dark. I tried another tape. Same room, different night, no video, but the same voice, same line. I checked the equipment. Everything worked fine. But whenever I played a backup from 302 at 4:17, the video cut and the whisper played. I took the tape home. That night, I dreamt of the room. In the dream, I was standing just inside the door, facing the corner. There was a shape there, unclear, like a human form but wrong somehow, too narrow, too still. It didn't speak, but I felt the words anyway. Felt them press into my chest like a memory I wasn't allowed to have. I stopped going into the room after that. I never told anyone what I'd heard. Not really. Not clearly. I even convinced myself it could have been some weird leftover frequency or damaged audio strip. But every time I think about that whisper, those 7 words, I feel a part of myself retract, like the memory has weight, like remembering it too clearly might make it real again. I still check the feed sometimes. From home, remote login, just habit. Room 302 is offline now, no signal, but the log shows a heartbeat, just for 3 seconds, every night. At 4:17 a.m., Story 2, the new janitor only worked when no one was watching. This happened to me in 2018. At the time, I was working night security at an industrial research complex about 20 minutes outside Raleigh. The place had a strange layout. 4 buildings arranged in a horseshoe, all facing a central loading zone. It was technically private property, but the company leased space to various tech contractors and lab startups. My job was simple: monitor the perimeter cameras, walk the interior loop twice per shift, and document anything out of place. We weren't supposed to interact much with the cleaning crew. They came in around midnight and usually left by 4 a.m. But sometime in mid-April, I started noticing something different. It began with small things. A floor that was mopped before I reached it. A trash can I'd planned to report as overflowing already emptied before I could log it. At first, I assumed the janitorial crew was just getting faster. Or maybe they had changed their route. But then it started getting personal. I had this habit during my shift. I'd eat dinner in a small staff break room between buildings B and C. It wasn't on the schedule, not part of the patrol path. I never told anyone. Yet one night I walked in and found the microwave wiped clean, the vending machine restocked, and my empty coffee cup missing from the counter. That was odd. The janitors weren't supposed to service the break room. I checked the logbook. No one had keyed in. No cleaning report for that area. A few days later, I noticed something else. I tend to avoid walking down corridor E. It's not out of fear or anything. It's just long, narrow, and always smells faintly like mold. I'd cut through the outdoor breezeway instead. Every time. Always. One night during the camera check, I zoomed in on that corridor and noticed the floor tiles had been polished. Just that hall, not the others. No record of service. Then I realized the pattern matched my behavior. Wherever I lingered, wherever I avoided, wherever I paused, those were the areas that looked recently cleaned. Not a general mop job, but targeted. Exact. I started tracking it. Every night I'd move slightly differently through the building, take a new route, sit somewhere else for lunch. And every night after that, that area would be spotless the next time I came through, even in places that weren't supposed to be on the janitorial list. It wasn't random. It was like something was watching me, studying my habits, then cleaning not where it should, but where I had been. The weirdest part? The cleaning wasn't consistent. Sometimes it was minimal, just trash gone or a wiped counter. Other times it was obsessive. A floor polished to the point of slipperiness, papers stacked with surgical precision. One night, the chair I usually sat in had been rotated perfectly to face the security monitor. The screen was on, frozen on a single frame of the north parking lot. I hadn't touched that control. I began feeling unsettled. I brought it up casually to my supervisor, just saying the janitors seemed to be working outside their assigned areas. He shrugged, said he didn't know who was on that week, that the cleaning staff rotated often due to contractor changes. "Don't worry about it," he said. "As long as the floors are clean, we're ahead." But it didn't feel ahead. It felt watched. About a month later, I started pretending to sleep during my shift. Not out of laziness. I wanted to see who or what was cleaning the areas that matched my routine. I positioned myself in the break room, lights off, head back, eyes just barely cracked open. I had angled the chair slightly toward the hallway. It was 3:12 a.m. when I saw him. At first, just a silhouette moving down the corridor, tall, thin, walking with a kind of deliberate slowness. Not a shuffle, not casual, like each step was measured. He wasn't carrying any cleaning equipment, no mop, no cart, no gloves, just walked in, stopped at the doorframe and touched the wall beside the keypad. 2 fingers, pressed flat. Then he moved on. I followed quietly, stayed far back. He didn't look behind him. I watched as he made his way through the complex, not cleaning, not organizing, just touching things. The chair in the security office, the fridge handle, the outer edge of the elevator door. Each touch was slow and brief, like he was cataloging the texture. At one point, I swear, he paused near the east stairwell, turned slightly, and looked up toward the camera. Not directly, just enough that his posture seemed aware of being watched. I checked the feed later. That camera glitched at that exact moment. Just a white screen for 3 seconds. I kept following. He entered Building D, an old section mostly used for storage. I knew the layout well. There was only one way in and one way out. I waited. 5 minutes, then 10. No one came back out. I walked the perimeter. Every door was locked. When I went back in, the interior was undisturbed. No footprints on the waxed floors, no prints on the door handles. Nothing. But near the service sink in the back corner, I noticed something. A streak of condensation, like something had been set down recently. Still damp. That was the first time I realized I wasn't watching a janitor. Not really. I started reviewing the security tapes more obsessively after that. There were long stretches where nothing happened. Then, always between 2:55 and 3:20 a.m., the movement would begin. Not every night, but often enough that a pattern emerged. He would appear on one camera just for a second, crossing a hall, standing behind a door's glass pane, then gone, never seen walking in, never seen walking out, only moving through spaces I wasn't in. When I told a colleague about it, he just laughed and said maybe I was seeing a ghost, but I didn't believe that. This wasn't some flickering image or hazy light. The figure had presence, detail, intention, and he only moved when no one else was around, only touched the things I used. I finally filed a report. Not a formal complaint, just an internal incident note marked for operations. I phrased it carefully, professionally. Unscheduled personnel observed during non-staff hours. No visible ID. Request confirmation of janitorial rotation. 2 days later, I got a reply from the cleaning contractor. It was a short email, just one sentence. We haven't serviced that location since November. It was mid-May, 5.5 months without contracted cleaning, but the floors were spotless. And each morning, without fail, I found a mop leaning against the door to the control room. Same angle, always slightly damp, still warm to the touch. I tested it. One night, I hid the mop in the rooftop maintenance closet, locked it, took the key with me. The next morning, the mop was back by the door. Same orientation, still wet, no footprints around it. I checked the rooftop camera. There was a brief flicker at 3:04 a.m., then nothing. The mop closet remained locked when I checked it later, but the mop inside was missing. I started hearing faint sounds during my shift, whispers almost, but more mechanical, like a cloth sliding across a tile, or water trickling from a faucet that was off, always when I was alone, always when I had just passed through a space. One morning I walked into the security office and found every surface wiped clean, and not just cleaned, arranged. My pens were aligned perfectly. My chair was rotated 5 degrees off-center, exactly the way I usually sit. There was a note on the monitor. Not handwritten, typed. All it said was, "Routine preserved." I took a leave of absence that week. I needed time to think or to forget. I never got a clear answer. The building's management changed later that summer. The cleaning contract was reinstated, but to this day, none of them could explain why the place had stayed immaculate through 6 months of no service. I spoke once with an older guard who used to work there before me. He was quiet, shaky, said something I never forgot. "It's not a person, it's the memory of one." I don't know what that means, but sometimes in the early morning, I still dream of that hallway, of a figure touching the walls where my fingers once brushed. And when I wake up, I always find the same thing, the doorknob to my apartment, still warm, like someone had been there, just before I opened my eyes. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. I answered a call from an empty room, and the voice knew my name. This happened to me in the summer of 2022. I was working front desk night shifts at a small business hotel just outside Portland. It was a modest property, 3 floors, 54 rooms, mostly business travelers or people passing through for events. I liked the hours. Midnight to 8 a.m., quiet, predictable. I had time to read, sometimes caught up on schoolwork. Only interruptions were the occasional drunk guest or third-party booking screw-up. We had an internal phone system that let guests dial the front desk directly or call between rooms. Occasionally a guest would call about noise or asking if we had toothpaste. But then, room 214 started calling. The first time was at 2:09 a.m. I remember because I had just finished inventorying the breakfast fridge and was pouring a cup of stale coffee. The phone rang. Line 214. I answered. Front desk. This is Claire speaking. There was silence, not static, not background noise, just stillness. I repeated myself. Nothing. Then, faintly, a voice, whisper quiet, but close. I couldn't make out what it said. I strained to listen, but the line disconnected. I checked the reservation log. Room 214 was vacant, had been for days. Scheduled for deep cleaning due to water damage. I flagged it in the system, told myself maybe it was a glitch, misrouted line, test signal, whatever. But it happened again, 3 nights later, same time, same room. That time, I heard a word. My name. Claire. Soft, familiar, like someone trying it out in their mouth, not calling out, just saying it. I didn't reply. I hung up, checked the logs again. The room was still marked out of service. I talked to maintenance the next day, asked if they'd been in 214 at night. They hadn't. The water issue hadn't been resolved yet. They hadn't even replaced the carpet. Still, I started logging every instance. Room 214 called again 5 days later, then a week after that. Always during my shift, always between 2 and 3 a.m., always silence. Except I remember what it said. Not just my name, other things. One night, it whispered, "Why did you leave the light on?" Another time, "It's not empty." But when I checked the system call logs, every one of those entries was labeled the same way. No voice detected, discarded recording. It didn't make sense. I even asked the tech vendor we outsourced phone servicing to. They said the system automatically flags and purges empty calls. Audio is only retained when a threshold of sound is registered. According to them, 214 had placed 6 calls over 3 weeks. None had any audio logged, but I remember every word. I started staying off the phone after midnight. I stopped bringing coffee to the desk. Something about that voice. It wasn't frightening exactly. It was worse. It felt like it knew me. Not just my name, my rhythm, my hours, the way I paused before answering, like it was learning. I didn't tell anyone else on staff, not really. The one time I mentioned it to the assistant manager, she just said the phone system was temperamental and probably needed a firmware update. But she looked uneasy. I could tell she didn't want to talk about it, so I stopped bringing it up. Then, about 3 weeks into the calls, a guest checked in around 1:30 a.m. He was middle-aged, business attire, quiet, paid with a corporate card, room 118. Everything about the interaction was standard until I handed him the key card. He paused, looked at me and said, "You're new, not the same girl from before." I asked if he meant a previous staff member. He shook his head. "I stayed here years ago. Room 214. Same voice." I felt my chest go cold. He leaned forward slightly, not intense, just purposeful. "She told me to leave a note." Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges, folded crisply into quarters, yellowed slightly. He slid it across the counter toward me. I wasn't sure who to give it to, but "I think it was meant for you." He didn't wait for a response, took his key card, nodded once, and walked away. I didn't open the paper until after he was gone. Inside, written in blocky, deliberate handwriting, "Don't answer again." That was all. No signature, no context, just those 4 words. I stared at the note for a long time. My heart was racing, not out of fear, out of recognition. I knew that handwriting. I couldn't place how, but something about the way the letters slanted, especially the capital D, felt familiar. I checked the security feed. The man went straight to his room. Didn't leave again that night. The next morning I flagged the incident in a personal notebook. I didn't want it in the official log. Later that week, I went up to room 214 during daylight hours. I told myself I was just being thorough, that I wanted to check for physical damage or signs of forced entry. The door was locked. I had the master key. The room was cold, not just AC cold, like insulation failure cold, the kind that sinks into your fingers. It smelled faintly like bleach and drywall. The carpet had been replaced, but it didn't match the pattern of the other rooms, slightly off color, like someone had rushed the job. I checked the phone. It was plugged in. Dial tone present. I unplugged it, just for good measure. That night, the front desk phone rang at 2:14 a.m. line 2 and 14. I didn't answer, but I wrote down the exact timestamp. Double-checked the physical line. The phone in the room was still unplugged. The call log still recorded the attempt, marked, "No voice detected." I didn't sleep when I got home that morning. I started keeping the ringer turned low after that. If room 214 called again, I didn't want to hear it. I figured the problem, whatever it was, would eventually resolve. Maybe the system would reboot. Maybe maintenance would find the source. But the calls didn't stop. Every second or third night between 2 and 2:30 a.m., line 214 would light up. Always during my shift. Always the same pattern. I never answered again, until the voicemail started. I didn't know internal calls could even go to voicemail. But one morning, when I was shutting down the console, I saw a red light blinking. One new message, line 214, timestamp 2:18 a.m. I hesitated, then played it. At first, just silence. Then I heard a voice, not whispering, not distorted. My voice. "Hi, it's me. I'm already upstairs." Then, after a pause, "Why won't you believe me?" I didn't breathe. I just sat there, gripping the edge of the desk so hard my fingers ached. I replayed it 3 times, same cadence, same inflection. It wasn't a perfect match, but close enough that I knew it wasn't fabricated. It was me, saying something I had never said. And it didn't sound like a recording. It sounded current, present tense, like whoever said it was still waiting. I checked the feed outside room 214 at the exact moment the message was time-stamped. The camera showed nothing, just a faint shimmer, like motion blur or fog right in front of the door. That was the last night I worked there. I didn't give notice. I didn't explain. I just stopped showing up. 3 weeks later, I got a call from one of the morning staff, a woman named Alyssa, who'd taken over some of the night shifts. She asked if I'd been by the hotel recently. I said no. She hesitated, then told me, "We got a message last night from the lobby phone." I asked what it said. "It was your voice. It just said, 'I remember now.'" She thought it was a prank, that someone was messing with the recordings. I told her to unplug the phone in 214 to log every call. She paused. 214's been sealed. Maintenance says the wiring's dead in that room. Nothing should be connecting to anything. I didn't have anything to say to that. She hung up soon after, said she didn't want to talk about it anymore. I've tried to forget it, but sometimes, late at night, my phone buzzes once. No caller ID, no message, just a missed call. And for a second, I always expect to hear my own voice, telling me I'm already upstairs.